Now, the last time, I brought the music stand up here so I could speak with you a little bit more directly. Somebody said, uh-oh. My friends, I have wrestled and struggled with how I might go about sharing the gospel of First Unitarian with you this morning. I have written and deleted pages and pages of words and verbiage. But it finally dawned on me, I am a slow learner. It finally dawned on me that gospels come in the form of stories of hope and salvation and redemption. And it finally dawned on me that the story I would have to share with you would have to be my own. So I confess right here and right now, my friends,
hallelujah.
I am a lifer. I've been a Unitarian Universalist since the day I was born. And I have to share with you one of the formative experiences of growing up in this faith. I grew up in Chicago on the north side, which was heavily ethnocentric, and my neighborhood was known as Greek Town, and all my friends went to the Greek Orthodox Church. But just across Lawrence Avenue to the south was a Hispanic neighborhood, and I had friends there, and they went to Transfiguration Catholic Church. And just across Foster Avenue to the north was a Jewish neighborhood, and they all went to synagogue. And just across the river was a large neighborhood of sort of Eastern Europeans, and they were Protestants of various kinds. And about 8 or 9 years old, I remember, and we went to the Unitarian Universalist Church like nobody knew what we knew, or nobody knew what we did. But about 8 or 9 years old, it occurred to me that all my friends went to these different churches, and I was like, so who's right? And how do you know? And so I asked my dad, and my dad said, well, let's go ask our minister. So we went to ask our minister. We made an appointment. We sat down in his office. This was at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Evanston. And we sat down in the minister's office, and I explained to him my problem. I've got my friends that are Greek Orthodox and Catholic and various Protestants, and then there's us. And like, so who's right? And how do you know? And he said to me, I will never forget this as long as I live. I can remember it like it was yesterday. He said to me, Mike, you are a slow learner. No, that's not what he said. He said, Mike, I'm so glad you've been thinking about this, but here's the unfortunate part. You may never know. You may never know like for certain. You may never know the answers to those questions in the same way that you know other things, like who your family is and where you live and what your name is. But, and this is the important part, don't ever think that just because you don't know everything, don't ever think that you don't know anything. Because, Mike, you know a lot. You know what makes sense to you. You know what you have experienced in your body and your mind and your being. You know people in your life that you trust. You know a lot. In fact, Mike, one of the things about being human is that you know more than you think you do. You know tremendous amounts of what it means to be alive. And in our church, Mike, what we want to tell you is that you know enough to live a magnificent life. Now, that answer made perfect sense to me at 8 or 9 years old. And I got to tell you, that answer has made perfect sense to me for about 52 years and running now. It was experiences like that one that led me to a revelation that I had about 7 years ago. It was that tragic, awful day when 6 Amish school children were shot in Pennsylvania. And perhaps it was because, well, at that time, like parents everywhere, like many of you perhaps, I had that awful feeling that day, and I thought, oh, God, what if those had been my children? And as my vivid and sometimes morbid imagination tends to do, I followed that thought, and maybe because my children were still small then, or maybe it was because I feel and still feel profoundly attached to them, But in my imagination, I believe I could almost feel what that would be like. But also in my imagination, as I have always believed, I would be devastated, but I would not be destroyed. On a day in a world that somehow and suddenly no longer included my own children, I am fairly certain I would find a way to carry on, and I am almost entirely certain that through all of that, I would still know who I was. The revelation was when I applied that test to my faith, I couldn't do it. That is, when I tried to imagine a world without this tradition, without the values, the morals, the spirit of my childhood and family, when I tried to imagine a world without my church and my vocation, a world that did not include a lifetime of associating with some of the finest people I have ever known, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. The revelation was that if all of that were suddenly taken away, I have no idea who I would be. None. So my gratitude for this faith is deep. And I'm here to tell you that what we do is deeply important and it is life-saving. Even so, what I'm here to share with you this morning is kind of my lover's quarrel with our faith. This will be sort of a brief tour of the good, the bad, and the ugly of liberal religion. And I have to be clear with you, it is a lover's quarrel. Because I love liberal religion. I love it in ways that have deepened over the years. I have a commitment to the principles of liberal religion that I will never, and I mean I will never, ever renege upon. Partly because it is my nature, mostly because it is my choice. I am a loyal soldier for this faith. I will die a Unitarian Universalist. And like most long-term intimate relationships, there are times when every fiber of my being wants to run screaming from the room. Every single fiber. For as much as I love this tradition, and I do, there are tensions that are irreconcilable. Deep dissatisfactions, arguments, difficulties that go back all the way to our foundations, and as we know, love as it is lived out in the spiritual give and take of daily life over years of time is a great gift to the spirit. It is a demanding discipline, and sometimes it is a pain in the neck. And as you veterans of long-term relationships know, difficulties are part of the fabric of long-term relationships, long-term intimacy. And you know, every now and then, things just have to get aired out, named for what they are, lest we avoid our issues or indulge too long in the luxury of denial. So I'm going to start with the good and two more brief snapshots of growing up a Unitarian Universalist. I have to tell you, I have not a single memory of Sunday school. Although I am assured I spent many Sundays and many hours in Sunday school. I have not a single memory. I'm sure I was there. I just don't remember it. What I do remember, vividly, what I remember vividly was the many Sundays in the 1960s when I would be brought to church and my parents would drop me off on the side of the church, and we would get loaded into somebody's station wagon or somebody's van, and we would go off to the local nursing home to play cards or sing Christmas carols with the old folks in those places. I remember vividly being driven to the housing projects in Chicago with garbage bags and rakes, and we would clean up the garbage. I remember vividly freezing on Montrose Avenue in the wintertime, serving soup to the poor, serving soup to the homeless men with the little brothers of the poor. Perhaps my most formative memory was being 7 years old and carried on my father's shoulders when he and a group of men from our church were marching with the Veterans for Peace at the 1968 Democratic National Convention, and ducking into an alley to avoid the lines of policemen, and smelling the tear gas and hearing the sirens and the shouting and the sounds of billy clubs as they struck human bodies. And how in the midst of that complete chaos, those middle-aged men formed a circle of protection around me from which I could not escape. Oh, my mama was mad at him when we got home. But along with my own children, I consider that day one of the great gifts of my entire life. That story I told earlier about the problem I had understanding the religions of my childhood friends and wondering who was right. Well, you know what? No wonder I was confused. I grew up thinking religion was something you did. Right? Church to me was when you got together with your friends to help somebody out. Church to me was, even if all you could do was go play cards and sing songs with some lonely old ladies. Church to me was where the questions of a child were so important that the guy in the big office would take the time to listen and give you back a straight answer. Church to me was when your family came together and put in a day's work for somebody who needed it. Church to me was where you taught your children that life was so valuable and justice was so necessary that you would put yourself in harm's way to state your truth and stand up to power, and you would know when you did that the church would have your back. Years later, I remember thinking, well, of course religion is something you do. And why on earth would anybody give a darn whether anybody else believed in God or didn't believe in God, or what label would be used for such a creature, and how many times a day someone else prayed, or in what position? I mean, really, what could be more ridiculous than people arguing and getting mad at each other about crap like that? Now, the truth is that the church of my childhood memories is still the church I'd like to be a part of. Even though now I know that in reality my perspective was the perspective of a child. As an adult, Unitarian Universalism in the liberal religious tradition does in fact speak to me, though to be perfectly honest, there are times when I have no idea why. In theory, this tradition gives me a value system that is coherent and compelling. It provides a context from which to approach the mysteries of life and death and love and suffering and ecstasy, and the paradoxical realities of existential loneliness on the one hand and the deep knowledge on the other that I am and have always been and will always be deeply connected to everything that is. I am inspired by its heroes and heroines, its martyrs and its thinkers. I believe passionately that the idea of assigning inherent worth and dignity to every single person without exception, is the highest, noblest, most moral idea the human species has ever come up with. And God knows the world would be a better place if that idea would spread. I love the fact that in this tradition we believe in results. That is, we believe the worth and witness of any spiritual path is determined or measured by how much love and how much justice it leaves behind. And I love that there is no other test, no other measure, nothing more complicated, nothing less ruthlessly demanding of us. I love that we recognize that there are many paths to that great end. Whether you call yourself a Muslim, a Jew, a Christian, a pagan, an agnostic, an atheist, or something you Buddhist, or something you've made up on your own, something you've adopted from somewhere else, or something you still struggle to articulate. And on a good day when the love is flowing, all this makes perfect sense to me. And I am home. And I know the ground on which I stand, and it is solid. And on a bad day, I see the flaws, and I am plagued by doubt. There are tensions in liberal religion, irreconcilable tensions between competing ideals that no one, let me tell you, no one, least of all me, knows how to reconcile. And if I'm really honest with you, as one should be, in an intimate relationship, if I'm really honest with you, it bugs me to no end. I will share just a few of the most prominent issues. We are a people with a strong sense of commitment and a weak and anemic sense of unity. Our tradition emphasizes individual freedom, individual choice, individual autonomy, and while this is one of our greatest strengths, it is also our most fractious weakness. We continually struggle with being a community of autonomous individuals. And this tension manifests itself at every single level of our organizational, spiritual, and communal lives. Our tradition emphasizes free inquiry, openness to divergent views. It puts a high value on diversity, even while we acknowledge the desire for shared content and a deeper commonality. We're committed to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We're clear we don't want creeds or any uniform statements of belief, but, we also want the search to actually lead somewhere. There is no issue harder to explain to our newcomers. And many of our visitors continue their searching elsewhere with the strong impression those Unitarian Universalists, they were the nicest people if only they knew who they were. On a bad day, I imagine sitting down for a come to Jesus meeting with liberal religion. And in my mind, I'm hurting and I'm a little angry. We need to talk, I say. And there's silence as we size each other up, each of us collecting our thoughts. And I continue, I value this relationship deeply. And I love all that we are together. And there are some things I need to say to you. I am struggling with some things that I recognize are within my own heart, but they are also within our common practice and our public image, and they affect my ability to minister to the congregation I am called to serve. Now, in my imagination, there's no person across from me per se, so it's not like liberal religion can actually answer back. Even so, there are times when some things just have to be said. And so I say to my tradition, I say, what do you tell people who are suffering? What do you tell them? I have people in the congregation, they are hurting and they are confused. There are people who are thirsting for some spiritual comfort, for a way to understand their lives, for an answer. What do you say? I should tell them. I say to my tradition, what's your response to the polarization of our nation and our culture? I'm not interested in any platitudes about how we should all just get along and play nice together. There are people out there that are playing for keeps, and sometimes they win. What is a spiritually grounded, religiously appropriate response? How do we do this in a way that models positivism and strength? Where will we find the spiritual fortitude to persevere in the face of hatred, personal attacks, blatant manipulation, outright lies? I say to my tradition, my beloved tradition, I say to you, all my life you have taught me that you stand for freedom. And that freedom is something that is sacred. That freedom is a basic necessity of the human spirit. You've told me this all my life, and I believe you. Tell me, how do you help make people free? How do you organize yourself to free people? Not only from the political or social structures that might oppress them, but deeper than that, how do you free people from their prejudices? How do you free people from their fears? How do you free people from the apathy and the despair that sucks at the heart of every single modern person? How do you do that? I say to my tradition, what hope are you offering this world? What faith do you offer this world? How do you convey to modern people this great spiritual truth that even in the face of suffering and loss, somehow, some way, we have to believe all is well? How do you convey that? How do you articulate that this is not given to us to understand necessarily, but rather what is given to us is to grieve our losses honestly and love without apology and trust somehow, some way that things happen the way they're supposed to happen? What anchor in this great stream of life do you give people to hang on to? I say to my tradition, what's your answer? Or even your response to poverty, to racism? How do you keep integrity with the ideals that you espouse in the face of these and so many other deep and pervasive issues that keep us all from being whole? Or how about this one? I say to my religion, my own faith tradition, my life vocation, I say to you, when do you get out of your head? When do you get around to dwelling in the deeper reaches of the heart and the soul? When do you stop reading the words ahead to see if you agree with them? And when do you just get to throw your head back and sing? When do we give people permission to really know themselves as one among many, part of a larger harmony that fills all of creation and holds all voices, all sounds, all souls in a vast, living, interconnected web of unity? When do we get to just sing praises of gratitude for all we have received without worrying about our intellectual integrity and without a shred of apology? When and how and with what authority do you call people out of complacency and into a deeper, richer, more engaged, more connected life. And if you can't do that, I mean, damn it, if you can't do that, then somebody tell me what the hell all this is for and what the hell I'm doing here. Now, in my imagination, now comes the hard part. In my imagination, liberal religion is largely silent in response to my questions. But neither does it leave the table. It does not turn away. It does not leave the room. It does not shut any doors. We've been together a long time, Unitarian Universalism and I, and we're not going anywhere. And we both know it. At the conclusion of my little rant with emotions raw and unresolved, we have arrived at a moment of truth. And we both know that too. And though it is unspoken, what is really being decided in the tenseness of this moment is the very nature and the very fabric of our relationship. Will it be honest and true, and therefore mutual and difficult and demanding and engaged? Or will we sacrifice difficulty and depth for mere platitudes and mere civility? What liberal religion does, in my imagination, this is probably the part I hate the most. What liberal religion does is essentially this: silently and with great dignity, heavy with the weight of wisdom from the ages, shaped by some of the finest minds that have ever lived, liberal religion reaches over and picks up a mirror and then holds it so that I have to look not at the tradition, not out at the world, not out at some external set of values, not at all the failings of humanity and religion, but backwards at myself. Indeed, this is what liberal religion does. And ultimately, this is what cements my love despite the difficulty. Now, if you happen to know my wife, you know that I have never been attracted to pushovers. Liberal religion turns all of our questions back to us. It says to us, in effect, you are free. Your eyes are open. You see what is real and what is not real. You know when you are choosing a deeper life or a slow spiritual death. What is your response? What is your response? When will you free yourself? What are you doing to make a difference in the things that you care about? When will you dig deep enough into your own heart? When will you Do the spiritual work of overcoming your fear. Find the courage to love without reservation. Let go of your need to claim and control things long enough to sense the love that wants to claim you. God, I hate fighting with my lovers. But I'm here to tell you this is the gospel of First Unitarian Denver, my friends. And this is my message to you. Don't be satisfied with mediocrity. Don't just slide along with the status quo. Don't go around pretending that if we just go about our business and have our little meetings and plan our little budgets, that everything's going to be okay. The world's not okay. You know this. People are not free. And you know this. Our larger communities are desperate. I mean, desperate, starving for a religion that binds us to each other and to the world and demonstrates this with every program and every decision we make. That's what religion's supposed to do. There's no doubt about this. I am not asking you to single-handedly transform the region or even this congregation. I'm not asking you to start some program or create some survey. Ugh. I'm not even asking you to double your pledge today. I am asking you to be agents of truth. I'm asking you to be agents of truth in your own heart, in your relationships, in your families, in your church, in this world. We, and I mean all of us, we find the strength to honor worth and dignity by living with dignity. We free people from their fears and prejudices by freeing ourselves from our fears and our prejudices. We call people out of complacency and into a deeper, richer life by staying loyal and engaged even through the hard parts. We counter hopelessness and despair by showing up for the fight, even when the outcome is predetermined. Love is not easy. And yet this is my wish for all of us. May you be agents of truth. May you know love, and by the grace of truth and love, may you never, ever have to look back with regret. Amen.